Well, I think that we had a pretty rigorous casting process in this film, and Mehmood, the casting director, and Anusha, who have a background in theatre as well, are pretty good with selecting good talent. And I think a bulk of the actors they've chosen in this case are actors who have never acted for film or cinema or ever faced a camera before. Uh, but they've got some really amazing actors. So for me, it's not really the big names that matter, it's how talented you are and whether you can deliver. And so when I saw the casting tapes, I was convinced that we had the right cast. They look the part, and a lot of the characters that Anusha has written in this case are very vibrant, and there's a lot of humor in the film. So for that to come out, you need great players, and I actually, once I saw the casting tapes, I had no doubts that these guys were the right bunch of actors for this film.
You just said having the big names is not a big deal to you. That is like anathema to Hollywood. Wait, is that how you normally operate? Because here it's having big names. It's
Well,
essential.
no, it is. Let me put it this way: big names have their advantages, and they bring in the audiences. But for me, as a creative person, being honest with the material is more important. And for example, Anusha and I were flirting with the idea of me playing Natha. Now, I'm a big name back home in India, and so that would have been great to bring in that many eyeballs towards the film. But but when we found Omkar, who finally played Natha, I didn't even bother to test after that, because we were clear that we'd found our Natha, and he was far better than me for this role. And no matter how big a star I am, he's the guy for this film. And so it wasn't a big decision for us to make that, okay, Aamir, you're out. Let's take Omkar in Natha's place. So I think what's more important is the casting has to be such that when an audience watches the film, that's when it works for you or it doesn't, and that's more important, really.
I'm curious. I was watching the movie. Watching Slumdog Millionaire a couple years back, and some of the reviewers had said that it was reminiscent of Frank Capra's movies. This movie is very Frank Capra.
It is, I would agree. Yeah.
Did you agree that?
I would agree.
What's going on with Frank Capra?
Well, I have to say I'm a huge Capra fan. I've also read his autobiography, which I was fascinated by. I don't know whether this is so much Frank Capra as it is Billy Wilder, actually. I believe I was told at Sundance when we were screening there, one of the audiences in the Q&A mentioned that there was a film by Billy Wilder called Ace in the Hole years ago, which they were reminded of when they saw Peepli live. And so I think that kind of satirical, humor, also a film which I think is heartbreaking, on a lot of levels.
Yeah, Meet John Doe is the Capra pictures.
Yes.
Barbara Stanwyck. Can you talk, how much is it based on fact? I understand we see a card at the end of the picture showing that there are numerous farmer suicides.
Yes.
Presumably that's an impetus for the film, and how much does fact and fiction play?
Well, a lot of it is fact, and I think the way that Anusha has treated this film is very realistic. So a lot of what you see actually happens in rural India today. And while this film is not so much about farmer suicides, in the sense that it doesn't go into the issues of why that's happening or the problems that farmers are facing, really, it's more about the growing divide between urban and rural India, and how as a society we are not concentrating at all on villages in rural India, and all our energies, our resources, our wealth are all focused towards cities. And as a result, villages in India today are not life-sustaining in a healthy way. and it is actually how the administration reacts, or how politicians react, or how media reacts, or how civil society in general reacts, is pretty accurate, actually. The way it's shown in the film is pretty accurate.
Do you think that's a dilemma specific to India? I mean, you have a similar thing in China. I think we're starting to see a similar thing in this country, where classes are becoming more and more ignored, and the government doesn't care about them.
That is true. I would tend to agree with that. So I think that this is something which is, no matter which part of the globe you live in, as it turns out, our observation tells us that people who are less privileged, people don't bother about them, or societies don't bother much about them, or governments don't like in Sundance, one of the responses I got from American audiences was that when Katrina struck New Orleans, the way that the administration reacted or the government reacted, a lot of funds didn't reach the people they ought to have. And on a lot of levels, how the media reacted also was quite indicative of I mean, it was quite similar to how it is in the film Peepli Live. And so it does resonate, I think, with cultures across the globe, yeah.
You know, it's interesting because it's true, the movie's less about the farmers and more about the media and the authorities. The media seems to come in and be very sympathetic, but really just wanting to use this to, you know, get more eyeballs. They don't seem to be too concerned with taking care, you know, addressing the issue, but more in exploiting the issue.
That is true, but the fact is that, I mean, the film is trying to be reflective of how things are today. And while, I mean, I have to say that this is just one point of view. So this is a satirical point of view, a humorous point of view towards, you know, how all of us are. And so if we take the media, for example, the media does a lot of good things as well. I think back home in India, a lot of accountability is now in place because of the media. So this view in this case is just one point of view. It is not an accurate 360-degree point of view on the administration or the media or the politicians, because a lot of the administration also tries to do good work. In this case, it's a satirical view. And a lot of, I mean, everything that's shown actually does happen as well. So, you know, in every department or every walk of life, you have different kinds of people. And this is a humorous view on how things are.